So I'm going to read your biographies, but in Spanish because we have our interpreter right now. Um, but give me a second, please. Bridget Case es especialista en tecnología lingüística con 10 años de experiencia. La movilización digital de lenguas indígenas. Se compromete a construir relaciones colaborativas para desarrollar proyectos que respondan a las necesidades específicas de cada comunidad, abordando temas vinculados con la lengua, la tecnología y la justicia social. Ha tenido el privilegio de trabajar y aprender junto a personas defensoras de lenguas indígenas, tanto a nivel local como internacional, mientras coordina el desarrollo de herramientas digitales para la documentación, el aprendizaje y la enseñanza de estas lenguas. Por su parte, Leo Vicenti, del pueblo Jicarilla Apache, es profesor asistente de diseño de la comunicación en la Emily Carr University of Art and Design. Es maestro en diseño de la comunicación visual por la School of Art Institute of Chicago y licenciado en diseño gráfico por Fort Lewis College. Su investigación actual se enfoca en la preservación, revitalización y reincorporación de las lenguas indígenas al uso cotidiano mediante el desarrollo de apoyo tipográfico y su representación en el campo del diseño. Paralelamente, lleva a cabo una investigación orientada a la práctica en el diseño, representación en el campo del diseño. Paralelamente lleva a cabo una investigación orientada a la práctica en el diseño de exposiciones que articula con sus proyectos creativos en comunidad visual. So, welcome Bridget and Leo. And happy to having you here. Su charla se llama Typotheque Indigenous North American Type. So, you can start to show your presentation, and thank you so much, Bridget and Leo. I'm going to necesitan poner su audio. Turn on your audio, Leo and Bridget, please.
Yes, absolutely. Can you see my screen?
Yes, perfectly.
Fantastic. Awesome. Leo, you can start us off. Take it away.
Yeah, welcome everyone, and thank you for having us both. Like Sandra said, my name is Leo Vicenti. I'm an associate professor of communication design. And Bridget?
Yes, and hi everyone. Thank you so much. My name is Bridget Chase. I am a language technologist working with Indigenous communities across North America to support language revitalization.
Thanks, Bridget. And then we'd like to start off today with a brief land acknowledgement. We would like to begin by acknowledging that this presentation occurs on the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Stalo First Nations, as well as from the homelands of the Hickory Apache Nation. Where we are coming from in the Pacific Northwest, First Nations never ceded or legally signed away their lands to the Crown or to Canada, and Aboriginal people in BC assert that most of BC remains unceded sovereign native lands, over which neither the Canadian nor BC governments have the legal or moral authority to govern. While in the sovereign landscape of the Southwest, which includes the Tiwa, Tewa, Towa, Keres, Zuni, Hopi, Ute, Comanche, and Apache-speaking communities, we see and recognize our Indigenous relatives in these and neighboring regions. The work and research we are presenting on today is directly influenced by the values, tenets, and perspectives of the Indigenous peoples of these lands. In acknowledging these territories, we are forefronting the collective responsibilities, reciprocities, and an ongoing commitment to Indigenous communities.
Yes, and we're here today on behalf of the Indigenous North American typography team from Typotheque. Typotheque is a type foundry based in the Netherlands, and the Indigenous North American typography team is a set of experts in Indigenous language technologies and typography. As a group of both Indigenous and non-Indigenous people, our goal is to break down the technological barriers for using Indigenous languages in digital spaces. Everyone in this room knows that when it comes to access to technology, some languages are more equal than others. Issues presented by a lack of encoding access, adequate keyboards, accurate glyph representation with typefaces, and other technical barriers can really restrict and reduce a community's ability to exercise self-determination over their language in digital spaces. And so in order to overcome such challenges, our team is working in community-driven partnerships in order to comprehensively research and document the encoding, keyboard sources, technical issues, and typographic preferences for each Indigenous language community in North America. I can go to the next slide. There we go.
Great. And as we know, North America is an incredibly diverse place. This is true both linguistically, but also orthographically in many writing systems that are used by each respective community. Within a single language, there are often many varieties, or what some may call dialects, many of which may use different writing systems. This diversity is something that should be celebrated, and ensuring accurate visual representation for all languages that is predictable across all devices is a cornerstone of language justice.
Absolutely. And so before we step into the modern technical challenges that communities face, it's important to understand where these writing systems originated. And so many writing systems in North America have a colonial history. There were often efforts made by missionaries, anthropologists, and linguists in order to adapt existing settler writing systems to capture the sounds of Indigenous languages. So they used English or French writing systems as the basis. But there are many instances where this is a situation of trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. It doesn't quite work right. And so in the last 30 years, there has been an increase in communities reclaiming ownership over their orthographic decision-making, whether that be through modifying their existing writing systems or developing new ones entirely. Some communities in North America have language authorities, which are established bodies within communities who engage in traditional protocol and consultation concerning language revitalization, and that includes making changes to their writing system. Community-led decision-making about writing systems is incredibly important for reconciliation in our modern context, and these decision makers are the leaders of this work. And so our team is working in active collaboration with community leaders to support them in making their orthographies fully accessible in digital spaces.
So how are we doing this? We develop those partnerships with leaders to investigate and resolve technical issues when it comes to using their language in digital spaces. And through this work, we are gathering research and information on each community's preferences related to encoding, keyboards, and typographic representation. Our goal is to develop an open source database of this information so that these preferences can be taken into consideration by everyone from developers working on big technology projects to font designers and more. More importantly, we start all of our collaborations with the development of a memorandum of understanding. The purpose of this is to start off with a set shared of values.
Right, and so these shared values are rooted in the principles of data sovereignty and community ownership of data. In our work in partnership with communities, we adhere to something called OCAP, OCAP, which is a set of principles developed by First Nations communities to oversee Indigenous data governance. It helps guide work around Indigenous language data and how that information will be collected, stored, used, and made available to the public. Our project maintains, above all else, that each individual Indigenous community must always retain the full right of ownership to all aspects of their language data. And they also need to have full self-determination over how their language data may be accessed and used. That means that our open source database that we're looking to develop will be community directed, and the information that is on there will be community approved for public consumption.
So what are the core types of issues that communities face that we are here to help resolve? In order to move into more complex technological advancements like addition to CLDR, development of speech-to-text, or adoption of orthographies in government systems like birth registries, communities need to ensure that they have access to full Unicode representation for their orthography, access to functional and thoughtfully designed keyboards, access to typefaces that accurately and respectfully render their orthographies. If these three aren't there, any more complex technological endeavors will likely be a failure to launch. So any challenges related to these three areas make up the core work for all of our partnerships.
So we always start with Unicode, because if a writing system isn't fully encoded, that's the obvious starting place. And our team has lots of experience in developing successful Unicode proposals. We previously collaborated with the Multilingüe community to add 12 missing syllabics characters. Syllabics is the name of the writing system that they use, and you can see that in this graphic here on the left. And that was during the launch or the publication of Unicode version 14. And then more recently, we supported the Celtic community in adding 2 missing capital characters to Unicode 16, which was just published in September of 2023. So these are examples where the community has an existing writing system that they use, but there are certain letters or characters within that system that were not encoded, and thus they are not able to be typed or used or viewed consistently across digital spaces.
Here you can see the timeline of work that it took to get from preparing the Unicode proposal until publication. This process takes time and can be complex, and so being a liaison between a language community and the Unicode consortium is one way we can help remove some of the administrative, technical, and bureaucratic burden off of language champions. As mentioned, as of September 2024, the new characters were included in Unicode version 16, and at this point, we have taken the community as far as we can on our own. We can't implement support in the big 3 operating systems, and so as of today, the Haltsic community is waiting for them to implement the support. As of the time of this presentation, no system picked up even core font support for new characters. We hope that this will change as soon as possible.
So the other Unicode-based issue that we can support communities with is what we call confusable characters. So characters that can be confused for one another. This is a big issue for a lot of communities because the average person has no idea how Unicode works. They simply open up their phone or computer and they start typing. Most people are not forced to understand the complexities and technicalities of encoding text. However, what this means is that for many Indigenous languages in North America, they, over the course of time, have started to use visually similar but technically different code points for a single character in their writing system. And when multiple confusable characters are mixed together within a single corpora of language data, it causes major issues when it comes to searching for things, finding things, indexing, alphabetization, and the ability for content to be used to design functional language learning resources. In addition, fonts often don't take these challenges into account. And so some fonts may display these characters as the exact same, while other fonts may have a visual representation for one version of the character, but not for the other. And so supporting communities in having a standardized set of code points that they use for writing their language then helps to ensure that fonts, keyboards, and other tools maintain consistency and accuracy.
So once an orthography has a standard encoding practice, we can move on to keyboard support. For example, after our successful proposal to update Unicode with the new Haltsic characters, the Haltsic desktop and mobile keyboards were updated to include the new characters. This was done for iOS and Android via the Keyman app, the desktop Keyman keyboard, the desktop key layout files for Windows and Mac OS, and the separate Google Chrome plugin for Chromebooks. When it comes to updating existing keyboards, or in some cases, building brand new ones, it isn't easy as slapping the right characters into a software like Keyman and calling it a day. There are lots of questions that need to be answered through community-directed guidance and feedback. As an example, when updating an existing keyboard, you may have assumptions about where keys should be placed or how things could be designed for efficiency. But even if something was originally designed in a way that isn't 100% efficient, does forcing an entire group of users to relearn their key combinations make sense? What is the history of use for the key layout, and what does the community prefer? When designing a keyboard from scratch, there are even more questions that need to be asked.
And I can give an example about that. So a number of years ago, I was working with a community to design a brand new keyboard because they did not have one. And I started by just taking all of the characters in their writing system, in their alphabet, and putting them into the different spaces and creating a layout that only included those characters. So it didn't include any characters that were not in their language, and that included F. They did not use the letter F in their language, and so I didn't put it on the keyboard. But upon beta testing the keyboard for me, one elder gave me the feedback that, quote, there might not be an F in my language, but there is an F in Facebook. And so when he went to use the keyboard to do something as simple as browse the internet and go to a website that he goes to every day, he wasn't able to type that website into the browser because it was missing an F. And so that's a simple example of how certain communities have preferences around wanting characters that maybe aren't in their writing system to still be incorporated into the keyboard so that they don't have to switch back and forth between their language keyboard and the English language keyboard. But on the other hand, there are lots of communities we've spoken with who have a strong preference in only having the characters for their language on their keyboard in order to sort of remove some of the English dominance in terms of digital spaces. So these are examples, simple examples of some of the requirements that we need to consider and the ways that the community preferences direct our work. And so lastly, there's the process of where keyboards are found. So as of right now, most Indigenous language keyboards are not available first party within operating systems, meaning that a multi-step installation process has to take place. This process could be done directly into onto your computer's key layouts, which can be complex and confusing for people who don't have a strong technical background. And on the other hand, you could go through a third-party app and download a piece of software and then find your keyboard on that. But that causes additional potential barriers with things like work or school laptops that might restrict what kind of software can be installed on that device. And so a lot of communities are now tired of having to deal with all of the technical and administrative challenges of having to get their keyboard through a third-party path. And so they are interested in having first-party integration of their keyboards into the major operating systems like Windows and Mac OS. But many communities have also had bad experiences working with big tech companies. And so just like how our team is able to help liaise in the Unicode proposal process, we're also able to help liaise with this process as well.
Finally, we have typeface access. As a type foundry, Typotheque has lots of beautiful custom fonts to work with. And so continuing with the story of our Haltsic partnership, our team updated 5 of our custom typefaces for Haltsic language-specific use. This means these fonts not only support the new characters, but have been designed to specifically reflect the typographic preferences for the Haltsick orthography that were learned through this collaboration process. Even when a community had a fully encoded orthography and a standardized set of accepted code points, technical issues can arise in the font design process if an understanding of the writing system and community preferences aren't taken into consideration.
Absolutely, and there are many examples of how there are many examples. Oh. There are many examples of how this can play out. So, for example, many languages that might use a Latin-based writing system with diacritic marks, there can be technical rendering issues when it comes to positioning those marks or how they sit on top of certain characters, even in very common fonts. And there can also be shaping issues. So, for example, in Haltsick, they use two different combining commas. You can see here on the word at the bottom of the screen. And these two different commas are used to represent different sounds. And so if a font does not accurately shape these diacritics differently so that it's visually, the speaker is able to visually distinguish between them, it becomes impossible for the speaker to know which sound the combining comma is intending to represent.
And even in fonts support the correct mark rendering, they might not have a font height boundary encoded into the font file, which means that even with common typefaces and within industry standard apps, characters can get chopped off.
So just like how we go through a process with our community partners in documenting and resolving both encoding and keyboard issues, we do the same with typographic issues and preferences. And so our colleagues later today, Kevin King and Chris Hernandez, will be presenting more about how this process works, how this consultation process works. But at a high level, our goal is to do this research in the right way so that we can provide insight and guidance into typographic preferences in order for other font developers to have an understanding of what fonts for Indigenous languages should look like. And we plan on adding this information and documentation to our open source information database that we referenced earlier.
Our end goal is to develop a community-driven information database with the text encoding, keyboard sources, technical issues, and typographic preferences for each Indigenous language community in North America. This publicly accessible data will be community approved and will open the door wider for increased levels of access, accuracy, and respect for Indigenous writing systems in digital spaces. It will also help to mitigate the currently common situation of the onus being on communities to do this work over and over again with different tech companies and organizations. It instead will put the ball in the court of software developers, font developers, and other people working in language technology to use the information available to ensure linguistic equality within their tech.
You can visit our project website to see our plans and processes when it comes to doing this research and what types of data will be marked as public for referencing and for the public domain.
And of course, all of the resources that are developed in collaboration with communities are owned and operated by communities. While Typotheque hopes to maintain long-term relationships with the communities that we collaborate with, we want to do this by offering to continue updating new fonts that are developed and supporting the future technical issues. We're not in the business of being a gatekeeper or key holder to community knowledge and tools. We build this into the foundations of all of our memorandum of understanding agreements with communities. In order for this work to be done well, it needs to be done right.
So one important note here is that none of this work comes at the cost of communities or to communities. So we don't charge for this work. We don't charge communities any money. And in fact, wherever possible, we try to pay people within communities for their time and expertise. We also provide all of the fonts that are developed through this process or updated through this process to communities to use for free in perpetuity. So communities will have licenses for all of these fonts without needing to pay for them. And so the question then becomes, how do we fund this work? Well, Typotheque as a company sells retail typefaces to customers all over the world. And Typotheque also creates custom fonts for big clients like the Ford Motor Company. They also sell books and merchandise, and we use crowdfunding through the Typotheque Club as a final option of extending our support for our work on Indigenous languages and with Indigenous communities. Now, it's important to note that 50%, 50% of all of the Typotheque profits are allocated each year to working on Indigenous language projects and digitally disadvantaged language projects like this. None of the costs of this work are put onto the communities that we work with. And what that means is that we need to find funding externally to continue ensuring that communities are able to receive this support free of charge. And we look forward to publishing more open source resources for people to be able to take the work and research that we're doing and continue to make digital spaces a better place for Indigenous languages.
Okay, to wrap this up, barriers towards using Indigenous languages in digital spaces negatively impact a community's ability to move ahead in their language revitalization goals and use their language reliably in day-to-day scenarios. The challenges to achieving consistent and accurate digital access for historically